let's talk about some of the problems I ran into now that I had this 3S GTE up and running and working really smooth. Big one that I really had to deal with, and it was really driving me crazy for the longest time, was I was having a heat issue and an engine heat issue. It seemed like my water coolant temps would just get crazy whenever I would push the car. And sometimes when I wouldn't even push it, they would just get crazy with just the AC on. So I knew it had something to do with I wasn't getting enough airflow to the bumper, to the radiator. So I knew I had to figure out a way to fix that. And the way I'd fix that is I've got to figure out a way to get flow past the intercooler. So what I did is I switched to a smaller air-to-air intercooler. That didn't quite work out. I put a fan behind that air-to-air intercooler. That didn't quite work out. I ended up going to a water-to-air intercooler. That didn't work out. It gave me great throttle response with that water-to-air intercooler because it had less piping to get to the intake, but it didn't help out with the heat soak. And so then what I ended up doing is I went back to the original first intercooler that I used and went with that, and I went with the higher flow fans. I ended up getting an aftermarket fan shroud. I got one of those Mishimoto race fans, the big one that just really pulls a lot of air. I put one of those on one side, and on the other side I put the biggest fan I could fit because the turbo was in the way. And from there, it looks like it's corrected the issue so that my water temps, they were creeping up to like 215, and it was just getting crazy. Next one was control arms. I was running into control arm problems like crazy. It was bushings. Also, I bent a control arm, and I didn't bend it bad, but it started getting like a little U to it that was just kind of weird. And that was one of the rear control arms. Looked around, couldn't find anything aftermarket. There's not a lot of aftermarket for this car, so what I ended up doing is taking it to a machine guy. He straightened it out and he reinforced it and welded some pieces on the back of it. And now that control arm's been good. Other thing I ran into was bushings. The bushings were original to this car, old rubber bushings, and I could just feel so much give in the car and turns and driving and everything. So I ended up putting some nice polyurethane bushings on there. Ended up having to get them from a company out of Poland, but it ended up working out. Got them installed, pressed in at a local mechanic, and running those on the car, and you could really feel the difference. I did not believe that polyurethane bushings could really tighten up the car and make it steer just like it was brand new. Then there was wheel bearings. I kept having problems with my front wheel bearings where they kept giving out. Come to find out, one of them was installed wrong. I had a mechanic install it. It didn't work out right. And within like a year, it was grinding again. Go back in there, come to find out, he didn't put the proper seals into it. So what I ended up doing is I ended up buying the right seals, buying a new wheel bearing, and by that time I had to buy a whole new hub because it destroyed the hub. Got it all pressed in right, did it myself, and now I haven't had a problem since. So make sure that when you're doing those wheel bearings that you make sure your hub is good, and make sure you get that inner and outer seal to make sure that it seals up right so that dirt doesn't get inside and just wear those bearings out prematurely. Last one was motor mounts. So ran into a couple problems with motor mounts. The first problem I ran with the motor mount was that the passenger side motor mount, it took my wife out for a drive one time. We were having a good time with it, and next thing you know, I make a turn, hear a loud pop, and there's this weird vibration coming from the car. So get it back home. I'm going through the car. I can't seem to figure it out. I thought I had an exhaust leak. Took it to a mechanic, and he's like, no, you snapped the bolt that went completely through that passenger side motor mount. And he's like, I don't know what type of torque you're running. And I was like, well, you know, I'm running about 2.5 times more torque than what the stock car is made. And he was like, well, that could do it. Replaced the motor mount, that problem went away. Also too, the driver's side motor mount was starting to go out, so I had to replace that. Problem with that is it's easy to do when the engine's out of the car, but when the engine's not out of the car, you have to disconnect all the motor mounts just to get that driver's side one out. So that's what I had to do, is disconnect all the motor mounts, have the car hanging by the hoist in the car while I just tilted and moved it around to get that one motor mount out. Also, the last thing I did is I did a modification to the front and rear motor mount. There's a company or a guy called Kirkosaurus. He makes these polyurethane inserts. You put them into the motor mounts, and that fixes the problem of the car wanting, or the engine wanting to rock back and forth. you got all that torque on there. It's basically just polyurethane inserts into the stock motor mounts, firms up the engine so that there's not that rocking motion. So great mod right there. So guys, thank you for listening to the Celica story, my Celica story. I'm glad that I got a chance to tell it. I wish I could have YouTubed it, but hey, you know, I wasn't really into YouTubing back then when I was building this car, but it was a great build. I love this car. I have so much fun with this car. I'm gonna bring more videos about this car. And if you guys got any questions, you know, just put them in the comments below. I'll also put a link somewhere to the beginning of the video series, the playlist, so you guys can watch the whole thing through. And thanks for watching.